Hi again. It's such a pleasure to welcome you all to this webinar on the challenges and opportunities of arts management in Armenia. The webinar has been organized by the American University Arts Management Program as we're kickstarting the International Arts Management webinar series. And I want to thank the faculty immensely for all their support in making this happen. I'm Anushti Tanyan, an arts management master's candidate at American University, Washington, D.C., and I'll be moderating today's conversation. Aside from creating a platform just to talk about arts management in Armenia and the professional development opportunities for artists, this webinar also aims to serve as part of extensive research efforts for me as I'm evaluating visual artist needs in Armenia as part of my thesis project. Thanks again for joining us today. The panel is going to last approximately an hour, and we will not have a Q&A session at this time, unfortunately. However, if you have any striking questions, you can just leave it in the comment section, and I'll try my best to address them during our next webinar, which is going to be in Armenian and is scheduled in April. Now, let me introduce our esteemed panelists. Who have an immense contribution to the growth of the arts and culture sector in Armenia. Anna Gargaryan is a curator and creative strategist born in Boston and based in Yerevan now. She holds bachelor's degree in arts history and chemistry from NYU and master's degree from Spinelli Institute for Art Restoration in Florence. From 2014 to 2020, she founded and directed High Pop-Up Gallery to support contemporary art in Armenia and encourage experiential and dynamic ways of art viewing and exhibiting. Gargaryan led various contemporary visual art projects, and now she leads the dynamic team of Catapult Creative Accelerator program implemented by AGBU in partnership with Creative Armenia. Vigen Galestian is an art historian and curator based in Yerevan. He received his PhD in art history from the University of Sydney, and between 2010 and 2018, Vigen was the director and co-founder of Lusadaran Armenian Photography Foundation, and later ran the Film Heritage Department of the National Cinema Center of Armenia. In 2022, he founded the Man Ban Visual Culture Archive, while also working as the founding curator of photography at the National Gallery of Armenia. Vigen also lectures at the American University of Armenia and runs the Arts and Culture section of the EVN Report Journal. Ani Chopurian, our next panelist, is a visual artist, fashion designer, and arts manager based in Yerevan. She holds several academic certificates in fine art and fashion design from the Istituto Marangoni, Milan, and from the Academy of Fine Arts in Tbilisi. And she's been part of various fashion shows and contests internationally. Anna is the founder of Bazaar Store, which emphasizes the importance of upcycled clothing and sustainable fashion. In 2022, Anna co-founded Art Kvartal, an art cluster with a gallery, artist studios, stores, and cafe in Yerevan. She currently works directly with contemporary artists and assists them with publicity and branding efforts. And our last panelist, Karina Aryan, is a multimedia artist and arts manager. She holds BA and MA degrees in journalism from Caucasus Institute and the St. Petersburg State University. She has more than 15 years of experience managing cultural projects. In 2015, Karina co-founded Hartak Workshop Festival Yerevan, a marathon of masterclasses, experience exchanges, and workshops. In 2017, 2019, as part of Team Communication Creative Agency, Karina also worked on a series of cultural projects, including branding of 10 Armenian museums, Gyumri branding project, and other entrepreneurial projects. Currently, Karina manages cultural projects at the Institute for Contemporary Art, Yerevan. Again, thank you so much for joining this conversation. And after this very impressive introduction of guests, I'll probably just jump into our first question, as you've been in the field for so many years. My first question is, how would you describe the arts management field in Armenia? Anna, would you like to start?
Sure. I can speak to that question from like my personal experience, but also from a place of research, because with AGPU Catapult, we've just finished a 1-year research project trying to map and quantify the creative industries in Armenia. So understanding exactly what the creative economy is in Armenia, what its contribution to the national GDP is, what is the state of cultural employment, what is the market for culture. So it's been a long journey, and it was quite a comprehensive study, and cultural management is one of the pain points that we've uncovered through the research. It's something that I think all of my colleagues can share in terms of our experience, that for such a small country, Armenia has a huge number of artists and creative talent, and that is very inspiring. But from the management perspective, we're lacking. And our research, which included both working with statistics from the Armenian National Committee of Statistics, but also included a national survey with the whole country, a telephonic survey, and also online surveys, multiple focus group discussions. It was, again, quite comprehensive. But the number one most needed professional expertise in the country by all creative industries, so I'm talking about visual arts, but also the music profession and the film industry and books and press and fashion design, so across sectors, was the need for management experts. That was closely followed by a need for social media management experts as well. So there is definitely a need for this expertise. I think I would also add to that the education system, that's mostly because the education system does not provide that knowledge. So currently there are very specialized institutes. There are Armenia, again, for such a small country, we have something like 42 universities, which is quite unusual. Ireland, by comparison, same size country, similar population, has 7 universities. And that shows that there's a lot of siloed division of expertise. So we have lots of expertise that's very specific, but there's very little communication across institutes. And management, we did a superficial survey, if I should say, of like what management courses are available in the country. And the most development management offerings currently offered in Armenia are located within the Yerevan State Pedagogical University, as well as the Theater Institute. I'm not talking about the quality of those programs. I'm just talking about what universities actually offer management degrees. Other institutes and universities offer courses, but they're not mandatory, and they're not really considered, cultural management is not really considered a real kind of degree option at this stage. And we see that when we work, because there are very few cultural managers, and that makes for a very chaotic and unplanned art scene, which has its beauty as well, as sort of lots of spontaneous happenings, but it really hinders the development of the sector, and long-term planning is not really part of how things work. And maybe I'll stop here, because I can probably go on, because it truly is a pain point in terms of the development of the sector.
Just a small follow-up question. Is the research accessible for public? Is it available anywhere online?
We will have it. We're launching the publication at the end of this month in the framework of Catapult Pavilion, which is our annual creative industries expo and exhibition. So that will be available by March 28th. Both in a PDF version online, but also we're making a hard copy book and plan to distribute it across cultural institutions and use it as an important advocacy tool for government too, because there's a huge component of how we should integrate these findings into cultural strategies and policy for long-term development.
Thank you. That's really important and amazing job you're doing. Karina, would you like to go next?
Thank you, Anush. Anna actually gave a great overview of what's going on in the industry, and I would love to speak about parts that, mostly from my experience, because I cannot speak for the entire field, but as part of the Institute for Contemporary Art, we work a lot with individual artists, curators, and we also have a school, which used to be 1-year courses for art critics, curators, and now it's developed into a more postgraduate kind of thing. It's non-formal and it's still in its experimental stage, but main idea that what I wanted to say that we also work with regional museums, not so much with the ones that are in Yerevan, but the main problem is, as much as I can see, it's at the foundation of these institutions, because they're operating based on Soviet rules. So in this post-Soviet period, they didn't change their structure. They still employ people based on this Soviet kind of thing. They don't have positions, for example, for PR, for fundraising. They don't have, right now, they don't have researchers, which was very important in the Soviet period. So they do not produce new meanings, they don't do research, and this means that they don't attract extra funding, and they don't have curators, so they cannot employ curators. They don't have this kind of position. So this means that the expositions are super old, nothing is changing, and they really see that they need this kind of expertise. So I think this is the point where the connection with the players in the ecosystem breaks down. So they do not cooperate with younger artists, they don't cooperate with individual curators, but things are getting better. I think Anna can confirm this because we see examples of some kind of artistic interventions or cooperation, like project-based cooperations between these museums and artists and curators. Problem is also financial, because this institutions, the museums, they have problem with funding. Most of the funding that comes from the government covers salaries and utilities and very small needs like printing and this kind of stuff. But when we want to, for example, the exposition to involve some professionals from outside, here is where it starts to fail. Another problem is their legal forms. Some museums, they are kind of community museums, and they cannot manage their spaces to manage kind of for-profit activities. They cannot attract extra funding, and because they also lack this people who would, for example, provide services like write grants, because I receive from a lot of museums that I used to work with. They ask me to support them in writing an application for specific grants. They don't know how to do it. This is the part of the museums. And when it comes to younger artists, we at the moment we run a project that is called How to Survive as an Emerging Artist. It's funded by the Art Nexus program by Swedish Arts and Grants Committee. And before launching this project, we tried to map the problems of the young emerging artists. And we have this a list of the common pains of people who are even mid-career, not early career. What they say is that they know how to paint, they know how to do the art, but now, of course, you have to be more than that. And the overall problem is the organizing your life as an artist. You have to take on a lot of financial responsibility. A lot of people don't have studios or cannot rent spaces to have their studios. The communication is one of the biggest problems, because sometimes it goes as deep as putting your entire message into the subject line, which happens. And people have problems developing their artist statement. By the way, Anna is one of the experts on this program and is helping these people to young kids, I would say from 18 to 32, to put together a decent portfolio, to write their artist statement. All of these things are new to them, and these are basic things actually. And then we start art residencies, international fairs, exhibitions. A lot of them don't have access to, and this is also a problem. So we're in this program, we try to give them this basic knowledge on how to do these things, how to organize your life as an artist, how to build a strong portfolio, how to communicate, how to apply for funding, for residencies, this kind of things. And also, I know that it's going to be your next question, but I would like to say that we developed a guidebook for artists in Armenian and English language, which is going to be published very soon. It's maybe 40-page thing, a PDF that will be available online, and we used insights from all of our program experts on all things like portfolio, artist statement, selling your art online, offline, participating in exhibitions, also things like intellectual property and like registering a legal form, and so on. So it will be available soon, and I will share it with you as well.
I'd love to. Thank you so much. We touched upon very important topics here, like the issue of finance, funding, communication, education, and so on and so on. And we also talked about artists and working with artists, which is kind of a small transition to my next question. What does the network or community of artists look like in Armenia? Begin.
Okay. Shall I proceed?
Sorry, was the question addressed to me?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but if you want to add something, Karne, you're more than welcome to go ahead.
What does the network of artists look like in Armenia? I mean, that's like, yeah, it's a bit like Alice in Wonderland, you know? I mean, you go in expecting to see one thing, and then, you know, you see the exact opposite, or something that is the opposite of what it should be. And at first it could seem quite messy and disorganized and lacking in cohesion, yet I think, you know, with the artist relations, but just cultural relations in general, it takes time in places like Armenia, and it's not just in Armenia, you know, it's in every other context that I have encountered. You know, you need time to sort of understand the way this system works, because as Anna very correctly stated, you know, Armenia is a extremely small country. The environment is very close-knit, you know, but essentially there's a huge number of cultural practitioners working in Armenia. A lot of them are under radar, and it can be quite difficult to get a sense of who are the actors in this field, and how are they connected, how do they communicate, how do they show work, who's consuming this work, you know. So it takes time to really get some insight, get an understanding, get some kind of a picture. You can't really get a full picture because it is so fragmented. I think there's a lot of polarization, you know, for a small country. You know, that's one of the paradoxes. You know, a small country like this, you sort of expect everybody to be very closely interrelated. And while people do know each other quite intimately, in fact, you know, there is a phenomenon of clustering. So you do find a group of artists or art managers or art workers. I would say it's not just about the artists. working within small communities, and they're not even often communities. It's really just like groups of friends, or however one might describe it. And there is often resistance to cross those boundaries and start collaborating on a different level, not only in terms of local groups, but also internationally. So one of the things that is extremely difficult for local artists is finding a channel, an outlet to kind of engage international institutions, international audiences, and this is particularly so when it comes to selling work. The network itself, it's very organic, it's very spontaneous, because people, you just unlike in more established art scenes in Europe or in the Western world, let's say in Armenia, you don't tend to meet artists in the sort of expected places such as galleries, I don't know, exhibition openings, although that's also the case. Often it's through word of mouth, or somebody will introduce you to someone, or you meet them in a pub, and or it's today Instagram, social or other social media platforms have become a very crucial, in fact, medium for meeting artists and encountering new work. So you also have this really, really interesting, but also very diffuse sort of field of the virtual networks that a lot of the younger generation obviously uses, not so much the older generation. And with the older generation, there's also this disconnect because a lot of them are not adept with these technologies, and reject them often, and so they can often feel like they're being left out, and they're becoming invisible as time goes on, because everything's today processed through these online relations. I mean, yeah, so that's kind of the general picture. Unfortunately, a lot of these networks are not institutionalized, but I don't see this as necessarily a problem. I mean, we just when we're talking about arts management, the expectation is that there's some kind of a formula or textbook scenario that should work in every context. That is not the case in my experience. I come from Australia, where there was a completely different system of relationships between artists and between artists and institutions. And in Armenia, obviously, the same paradigm or the same system cannot be viable. And you just have to, instead of often kind of assuming that there's something lacking, one really has to kind of understand how these relations work in situ, how are they grounded, and what are some of the positive things that come out from these type of maybe not orthodox relations, and perhaps we have to build on them rather than trying to enforce systems that have been appropriated or imported from other contexts, which are I don't know, have longer histories in terms of institutionalized art management than Armenia, but they often tend to fail when you start employing them here. And this is a mistake that I see over and over again instituted with various programs. We come and we're like, oh, we don't have this and we don't have that, and we need to institute this mechanism without actually kind of really questioning, well, is this mechanism really viable here? And the irony or the paradox in Armenia is that facing this lack of institutional support and institutional mechanisms, the art scene continues to exist. It continues to develop and sometimes devolve as well. There are periods where there are, you know, very sharp regressions, and that I think is normal. But I mean, this scene kind of sustains itself, and nobody has really tried to understand how, why, what is this driving engine, you know, that makes art practitioners do work when seemingly there's no reason for them to do it. I mean, in terms of economics or finances or even public appreciation, you know, because so many of these artists are on the margins of social relations. They're just not recognized, they're not valued, nobody buys their work. So there isn't really any tangible or rational reason for them to continue to create, but yet they do. So something must be working, and we first of all have to understand what is the intrinsic quality of the art scene here that kind of makes it into a small miracle. I think every day I think it's something of a miracle that it's still there, that it's growing and as interesting as it is.
Thank you so much for such an insightful overview. I know Anna wanted to add something on this, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, so many things you said, Vegan. I wanted to kind of jump off. I think the first thing was that I think these networks in country, they're very, there's very much a generational component to it. Because like he rightly shared, is that like social media has created a whole new network, particularly Instagram, but that tends to be with the younger generation, whereas the older generation tends to use Facebook more than Instagram if they use social media. And then we also have this kind of Soviet legacy of the cultural unions, whether it's the artists unions or the film union or the writers union or the composers unions, which again, if I make reference to our research, out of those organizations that we surveyed, only 6% are registered to unions, which is quite significant because it shows that these unions are not really fulfilling their mandate as for today in terms of like, well, what does the union actually bring? Originally, they were mechanisms for organizing the sectors and promoting their work. And those mechanisms need to be kind of revisited. At the same time, there's a whole generation of people who are still registered there, and those people should not be forgotten, and they hold some kind of knowledge that that we need to preserve, and sort of that institutional knowledge, which Vigen was saying. The other thing I wanted to share is that I think there's so little funds for the arts in Armenia that those few funders, like our partner, for example, Creative Armenia, provides artist grants and has an incubator for the creative sector called Artbox. And because they provide knowledge as well as grants, but because the grants, of course, are a huge incentive, and a lot of artists, small startups, designers, freelancers have signed up to Creative Armenia and their various programs. And almost the whole sector has gone through them just because there really is no other founder. I mean, they do good work. We're their partners, so we totally admire their work. But you can just go on their website and see almost all of Armenia's art scene today because I think funders have a key role there in terms of establishing networks. And the last thing I wanted to mention is I do think that this, I mean, it's a highly, highly social culture in Armenia. And, you know, Vegan mentioned like at the pub is where you meet everybody. And it's true. Like you can do more networking in like a night at the pub than you can at some kind of special conference or a seminar. It's a social culture, and people like to be out, and they like to share, and they like to meet physically. So as much as social media is important, physical meetings are super important. And that works really well in country. I think it becomes problematic when we're talking about representing Armenia's creative scene abroad. So the sector has sustained itself in this miraculous way, as Vigen put it, but it still remains a very isolated reality, and a lot of people outside don't know about the wealth of things that are happening inside, and they come surprised. Sometimes they come because they're waiting for a visa for Iran, like they're not even coming to stay in Armenia, and then they're like, whoa, this is a cool, weird little place, and who knew? And the messages that do go out to the public tend to be message about war and the geopolitical situation, which is equally a part of our reality. But those stories about the creative talent and are not really getting out there. And that's where I think there's a real need for new networks in terms of making connections to international markets, to international platforms for viewing art. Again, our survey showed that 80% of creative organizations do not participate at international expos and events, which is where you find collectors, which is where you find investors, because of the prohibitive costs of going was the first reason. And the second reason is because of issues of visa. We are isolated on many levels, and people, as much as they want to go out and share and be part of international discourse, we're very much isolated. So I think the organic networks that have happened in country have created this really interesting tapestry of different clusters of communities. And I'd love to hear Ani's perspective, because Art Quartal is one of these interesting clusters. But in terms of reaching international markets, because our market is too small to be sustaining in any kind of significant way, we're missing those mechanisms and those tools to organize on a national scale and really be on international platforms.
Thank you so much for bringing up the international perspective and also touching upon the cultural and social aspect of Armenia, especially for our international audience. I'd also love to hear Ani as an artist and also as an arts manager working directly with visual artists a lot.
Yeah, from my experience and from a management perspective, Armenian artists have several key needs and pain points and problems, and that is also connected with a lack of art agents and managers, because we don't have enough professionals who will guide the artists to go through the, let's say, correct career opportunities. And the first, let's say, pain point from my end is access to resources. Armenian artists often require access to resources such as funding, studio spaces, as also said, equipment, materials, and technical support. Art managers can play a huge role here in securing funding opportunities, because I believe that there are a lot of new opportunities for Armenia and Armenian artists, especially from Europe right now. And from my end, Art Quarter has a lot of new opportunities this year, and our artists are going to be part of that crazy trip and showcasing Armenian contemporary art like abroad. And we should have a lot of, let's say, keys providing access to affordable workspaces and a lot of resources. And the next point from my end is professional development. Many Armenian artists would benefit from opportunities from professional development, and including workshops, training programs, mentorship, especially mentorship, and other initiatives. And art managers can facilitate skill building workshops right now, and networking events and mentorship programs to help artists develop their artistic practices. And the next point from my end is exhibition and performance opportunities. Armenian artists need platforms to showcase their work. I mean, professional workspaces and professional exhibitions with the correct concept, which is guided by a curator. We have a lot of problems here, and we need professional curators to come up with the ideas and collaborate and create new and professional exhibitions right in Armenia. And also, we don't have enough professional spaces and galleries
starting from the lighting problems and then ending from technology problems. We don't even use technology in our exhibitions. That's crazy, because contemporary art needs to be technological. And the next problem, of course, and the biggest problem from my end, is marketing and PR promotion, starting from the government. So Armenia is not PR'd at all abroad, as we also said. And effective marketing and promotion are essential for raising awareness of artists' work and attracting a lot of buyers, art buyers, to our country. And art managers can develop these marketing strategies, create promotional materials, and utilize digital platforms and social platforms to showcase artists' works. I have noticed a lot of online e-commerce platforms where Armenian artists showcase their artworks, but this seems like just a platform, you know? And that's something that needs to be led from another cultural organization. And this is something that really huge problem in the manner of management, art management. And of course, for showcasing and PRing artworks, we need to have promotional events and engage more audience online and offline. And of course, networking and collaboration is a part of this journey, and building network and collaboration partnerships is a crucial for Armenian artists to expand their art careers. And of course, artists should know the cultural policies. We have to start knowing about artworks and their copyrights, rights and interests, and Armenian artists may require representation to address their rights, interests, and needs within the broader cultural ecosystem. I believe I provided a comprehensive response to the question.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Anijan. And we talked about the professional development opportunities, and I believe Vivian has something to add here.
No, I just wanted to follow up on what Ani was saying, you know, in terms of she very nicely put out the overall picture of what is the scene lacking and what we need in practical terms, you know, these tools, obviously the platforms, this is all absolutely true. But I think one of the reasons that these issues exist in the first place, I mean, why in 2024 we're still kind of talking about, oh, we don't have marketing specialists for the arts, we don't have viable platforms for contemporary arts, or, you know, sort of experimental art spaces, you know. But it's almost like, you know, Armenia has just fallen out of sky and is just discovering in 2024 what is required for a vibrant and viable art scene to flourish. But the part of the issue, in my opinion at least, is that we were not asking the more sort of veiled ontological questions as to what are we exactly managing here? You know, what is the product? Are we talking about, if the point of discussion here is contemporary art, are we talking about blue chip art? Are we talking about a sort of contemporary national art that is serving certain higher goals, right? Are we talking about political art practices? Are we like what is the art production exactly serving in this country? And I think there's been a crisis of perception here following the collapse of the Soviet Union, because obviously during the Soviet Union, you know, arts production and arts management were strictly regulated according to a regimen stipulated by the state, and which was ideological and served very specifically laid out needs. Post-independence, after a short period of time where, you know, artists were all sort of inspired about this bright utopian future in the context of neoliberalism, you know, and there was a movement to put contemporary arts and contemporary art practice in the service of constructing this new sort of independent state. And very quickly, of course, that illusion dissipated, and artists realized that, well, you know, politicians don't need them, society doesn't particularly have any need for them. Yeah, so they become this sort of marginalized and ingrained kind of group of people who today are sort of swimming in the open sea without having a clear understanding where they should be mooring their boat. Who is the artist serving in this society, and who is their work specifically for? Who's the it's not just about the audience, it's about the integration of artistic production, artistic thinking, and knowledge production into the wider and larger socioeconomic and political processes. That this is not happening, and this primarily it's not happening because the government doesn't have a clear agenda in terms of cultural diplomacy and how to integrate contemporary artists and art practitioners into this mechanism. It doesn't know what to do with, you know, because contemporary art is, of course, oftentimes critical of government, of current reality, and, you know, not certainly throughout Armenia's independence, none of those governments have particularly liked. They tolerated it, but never tried to use that critical potential of the contemporary art to service, you know, to serve the betterment of the country. So we have this dichotomy essentially, and I think in order to resolve a lot of these issues, in order for these platforms to, I mean, a platform doesn't just exist for its own sake, it's serving a particular need. And you can't just say, well, the country needs contemporary art just for its own sake. Maybe, well, maybe it doesn't. I mean, if society doesn't have a demand for it, then, you know, we have a systemic and fundamental problem. So who are these artists making work for? Why are they making this work for? And who needs this work? And who is it communicating to? I think these issues need to be seriously addressed first before we start kind of thinking, well, we need those tools, we need these mechanisms, and we need these processes. And which is why so many of the existing platforms currently, you know, they just kind of exist in inertia. Like one of the key spaces for contemporary art in Armenia, NAPAC, or ACCEA, is kind of, you know, it's an auto, you know, it's on an autopilot mode, comparing with how it started in the early 90s, where it was one of the most exciting, vibrant, provocative spaces for any kind of artistic production. Today, it's like, you know, I mean, I don't go there, I barely go there. It's not one of the major players. I mean, this is just one of the examples I'm bringing here, and that this is sad, and this is a problem facing a lot of smaller spaces as well, smaller platforms as well. They need to understand why are they doing what they're doing, and who is it for first of all.
If I may riff off of what Vigen said, I think the important piece here is this bit about the role of government in developing the scene and in establishing this value that Vigen is questioning. You know, we've, like, for comparison, the tech sector in Armenia has been doing really well, and everyone is so impressed by these great tech startups and unicorns that are, you know, and it's a point of pride, but it's not coming out of nowhere. That this sector has been actively subsidized and supported by the government as well. So it's not just about investing and pouring money into the sector, but it's also about creating an environment that support its development. So if you're a tech company, you have subsidized access to space. You have tax deductions on certain imports and on certain exports. And I mean, the environment is promoting and actively supporting workers in the tech field. But ironically, the big tech success stories are all creative tech. It's, it's PixArt and it's Render Forest. And, these are, it's Popok Studios who are animators and illustrators. I mean, imagine only if we had more crossovers between the tech sector and culture, and if we supported culture in the same way that we supported tech, what would come of that future? So really, a key issue is a lack of funds to the arts, for sure. I mean, our research has shown that since 2018, public funds to the arts have been steadily decreasing, not nominally, but in percent as the GDP is rising. So there are very little funds to the arts. And in general, we don't have a separate fund for culture. We have a fund for culture and recreation, which includes sports and it includes gambling. I mean, what is that? That's not fun for the arts. We don't have an endowment for culture. We don't have an arts council that is actively advocating for this sector. So it's not surprising that national strategies are not actively thinking about how we support the arts and how do we develop the arts. So that is a huge lack in terms of a policy development. And we don't have ministries of foreign affairs involved in those policy discussions. It's kind of dedicated to the Ministry of Culture, Education, Sports, and Science. That's one ministry. But Ministry of Foreign Affairs are usually involved in culture because most countries understand that culture is your best ambassador. That is your best bridge towards other countries. And most art councils include a Minister of Foreign Affairs because that is how you project a strong image of your country and your culture abroad, especially for Armenia. We don't have many natural resources. We do have a lot of creative talent. Why can't we mine that creative talent the way we're actively mining our mines on the borders and devastating our landscapes? So I think there needs to be, for sure,
because they see the arts as a risk. I mean, society and the government sees the arts as a risk, and as a conservative society in all senses of the word, we like to invest, we like to put the money in certainties. So, which is why the primary export out of Armenia when it comes to cultural material is traditional arts. It's the, I don't know, medieval arts, ancient, etc., or the classics of modernism, such as Saryan and Minas Avetisyan and Suryanyans, etc. But it's not the art of our time, which is risky, which is untested, but that's precisely the point. That's
it's not even a question of it being too risky, because the tech sector back in the day was risky too. We didn't really know what was going to come of it. It's a lack of vision and understanding. It comes from a very antiquated mindset that culture and economic viability or economic development are not part of the same world, when that's exactly the opposite of what research has showed, is that the creative industries are the fastest growing sector in the world, or I should say in Europe, and it's the biggest employer in Europe. And if we have more crossovers between the cultural sector and other sectors, I mean, that's where, new businesses are born on these fringes of culture merging with new technologies. And it is an economically viable path to explore. And this could be a whole socioeconomic development opportunity that we're just not tapping into, because we see culture as being this pure spiritual thing that, God forbid we confuse it with, or we, sully it with commercial intentions. There's still this kind of idea that the arts should not be commercial.
It's kind of, it's an exalted field of collective sort of expression. That's how institutions also view local arts, you know. So it's very, very difficult to kind of push a kind of arts, and I'm not just talking about contemporary arts, because it's the same issue when you're kind of trying to rethink or review sort of the artistic legacy of the country and approach it from a different perspective. You know, it's you're facing an this insurmountable wall of basically, I'm not going to say aggression, but resistance at the very least to change the status quo. You know, people here, or you know, people who have the reins when it comes to art institutions are very, very reluctant to kind of, you know, make the system more dynamic and more flexible and more fluid, and do consider this. And when you know, like when they do consider the options of, for example, monetization and economics and finances, it's often in a very crude manner. Like you know, it's like, who can make a souvenir? Like who I mean, that also the perception of the market is extremely primitive
I
when
mean,
it
as an
comes
example,
to,
and sorry to jump in, but the work you did at the film archives was beautiful. I mean, Vegan spearheaded this whole effort of digitizing film archives and then subtitling them so that Armenian films could be accessible to international markets. And through this process, he actually brought funds to the institute because people were purchasing the licenses and rights to Armenian films that now finally were accessible because they had English subtitles. And it was like a light bulb moment for the institution, like, oh, archives can also bring us
yeah,
some funds.
yeah.
And that's huge.
Yeah, but it's sometimes like something really elemental like that, that yeah, you're sort of like, why are we doing this work now? Yeah.
So much to
It's
be done.
it is simply because like this national film heritage has never been seen as an economic resource, like just like much of our culture, whether it's contemporary or traditional. And I think but it's a, I mean, it's a very dangerous area as well. I do think, you know, when you're sort of thinking about parallel examples where local art scenes have become sort of, I don't know, consumed or cannibalized by the market, and you know, you just see the work that is produced and you realize that the market dictates, quite scary. And I don't necessarily want that to happen here either. But there's got to be, I mean, we've got to find means of really using economics to support the production of really challenging and provocative art, rather than the other way around, you know. And I don't know, it's gonna take a long time until we figure that balance out, I think.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'd really love to hear Karina's perspective on this too, as a multimedia artist and arts manager.
Yeah, it was very interesting, and I agree with everything. I just wanted to say that for me, if we condense everything that has been said, at the end we will have communication as one of the main problems, because we do not communicate what we do. I will bring an example. When I started to work at the ICA, where I work now, before that I was a student in 2012. I was taking a one-year course in curatorial studies. So, and now when I was back, I said that look at the Armenian part of the internet. Art is nowhere. If you Google what is contemporary art in Armenia, you will see first link will be some discover top 5 contemporary art galleries and this kind of thing. Something else, and then our institute, and then everything else. And the problem is when I said, I asked Nazaret and some of our teachers, what if we start creating maybe an on-demand or like a commercial product, like a series of lectures on contemporary art or something like this? There was a huge resistance. People don't want to talk about it. People kind of feel it's not real or something. I don't know how to describe it. But if you look at the internet, it's politics everywhere. Politics. Any post about politics will have a lot of comments, a lot of reactions and stuff. If it's a post about art or some artistic achievement, if it's not sports, it's not some IT thing, it's probably liked by 10 friends of yours and your grandma or someone else. Like there's a very small circle of people interested in arts, but if you go and really look into what the internet offers, I don't speak about libraries. So there is nothing. I think we need to first of all map ourselves. For example, Vigen created this archive about films. Marina Karayan, as long as I know, she created an archive of performing arts. And since the government delegated all of these things to individuals or some individual initiatives, everyone tries to do their best, but we don't even have like a simple Wikipedia page about Armenian contemporary art, so we can go and look for some directions to start our search with. So I see this one of the problems. And also I think that as an artist, I used to do this thing my whole life, and I started publicizing my work maybe during the pandemic, so I don't have a lot to say, and sometimes I mean, I cannot speak for artists, but I know a lot of artists, and I can say that we're over visible. But I see also some initiatives like, again, individual initiatives like Art Insight. You probably heard about them. They just created this missing e-commerce or like information platform for contemporary art, where they want to present and help Armenian artists to sell their work, but all of these things have to be mapped maybe and unified in publicly available channels, because we need to identify and map these things for ourselves first of all. A lot of art students, they don't know about basic things like third floor movement or the basic things that everyone knows, like in this small circle, but they have to go outside. So I think one of the main problems is that it's informational inconsistency, lack of information about Armenia, because if you look at the post-it countries, even countries like Russia, they have this problem. They really struggle to sell Russian art. I mean, they're in a much better place than us, but if we speak about Kazakhstan or countries like this, as much as I know, I follow some collectors. There may be 30 or 40 artists selling, but at least their names are known to collectors around the world, because someone has to do this work.
But don't you think, just a question, don't you think that like these platforms, individual platforms, for example, like an art market, Armenian art selling platform, I feel like some of them are a bit not futile, but the goal is to have Armenian artists on existing platforms that reach big markets, not to create the Armenian version of Etsy or the Armenian version of ArtNet. I mean, we want to be on ArtNet. We want to be on Saatchi Art. We want to see Armenian names there, so that it's part again of this global discourse and not again isolated. Because if I'm a collector that doesn't have a particularly emotional attachment to Armenia, why am I going to go and search and find the Armenian art sales platform? It's always more engaging to me when it's in connection with, even like from a regional perspective, like with Georgian artists and Iranian artists, and that this was kind of one of our questions at Catapult, is like, how can we help funnel artists to these already established platforms that already have buyers with money to spend on unusual, they're always looking for the next new uncut diamond, this sort of like raw precious stone. But But, part of the problem is that it's really expensive to be on those platforms, or it's like very technical, like Armenian bank accounts are not, accepted by Etsy or not accepted by SoundCloud. So you can't monetize on those platforms as an Armenian artist. You need a friend in the US who's going to open an account for you. I mean, I think this is kind of where maybe innovation can happen in the future, as coming up with like proxy solutions so that artists in Armenia can actually be on those platforms technically, and we can enable them to monetize there, because otherwise it's really unfair. We're off, those options just aren't really open to us if you don't have an account outside of the country. I know a lot of artists who've opened bank accounts in Tbilisi just so they can have PayPal, because PayPal is not available here. PayPal is not the best solution, but as an example, and there have been some new things like Apple Pay and Google Pay are now available, which is great. But I think technology can help us there in helping to create new infrastructure, which we currently don't really have.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I just hope that platforms like Art Inside or any other e-commerce platforms, they will become experts, and maybe over time they will become those third parties that will help Armenian artists to register on this kind of platform, because I know a lot of people who cannot put together a simple sentence about them. So the communication problem is really, really strong, because a lot of young artists, they don't speak English even on basic level. And there's another problem too. I asked this question some tech people. So why don't you offer government your service? For example, basic things like we do not have this screens showing when the bus is coming, or this kind of things. And we are a tech country, so art is in the bottom of this list of the projects. So this is the sad reality. But I think we are a little impatient, because things happen when they happen, and they happen organically, as much as I can see. Because last time for example, we were discussing this idea of why don't we have an art district in Armenia, well, in Yerevan right now. And there were people from the government, they said that they consider having, I think, supporting an art district in Kond. But the problem is, if it didn't appear organically, it's not the right time for it, because there are a lot of cases when government pushed this kind of thing, and those initiatives didn't age well. We know a lot of cases like this. I don't know, I'm optimistic. I see, compared to the situation 5 years ago, when, for example, there was a single-handed initiative of a man from Berlin Art Hotel who was organizing some art sales or a trip for Gyumri-based artists to international fairs. And now we see Creative Armenia, we see HBU, Catapult, so it's getting better. I think it's getting better.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I feel like this conversation could go for hours and hours, because it's a very important topic and very, very interesting to me personally too. But I'd love to wrap up this discussion and not go a lot over time. And I'd love to hear all of your responses to our last question. We talked a lot about the challenges, and what are the opportunities of arts management development in Armenia? How do you envision the field in like 5 or 10 years? Because you individually and you representing an organization are doing a lot. And I'm also very hopeful that it's just developing, it's going organically. Would you love to start, Ani?
Sure. So from my end, I know that we have a lot of issues, but I believe that what we do right now from my end, from our end, from our quartal end, will bring a lot of new results for Armenia. And I believe that everything we have done is pretty progressive. And the main issue that everyone needs to know right now, we have to plan everything that we need to do. We don't need to wait for someone to do that for us. We don't have a planning, and we want something to happen for ourselves. that will never happen. And from a positive perspective, I believe that right in the future, we will have a lot of more professionals, and we will, let's say, bring another innovation to our education, because we have educational programs as well, and we will have a technological integration to our exhibitions and cultural institutions, and I believe that will happen in the future. And I believe that we will have sustainability in art field and a lot of collaborations and networking, because I see how art residencies abroad are interested in our projects, and this is something that will bring us to the next level. For example, this year we will have a huge group from Poland located in the center of Yerevan. Like it's crazy, and we will start collaborating and networking with each other, and then our artists will go to do a cultural exchange in Poland. So this is also something very positive, and we are lucky to have a opportunity right now, and also work with a lot of artists, Armenian emerging artists, who need some sort of art management, and showcasing their artworks is a high priority for us. And for artists that listen to us right now, I would love to say, if you need some, let's say, help for organizing your exhibitions, or any questions how to get in touch with Art Quartel, please find us on social media, and also email us any questions. Our curators will be back shortly.
Thank you so much. Weekend?
Look, you know, in terms of future projections, I mean, I believe things will be great, as long as the country is the political situation in the country, and of course in the region, stabilizes to some degree, because it's like, you know, we've been talking about all these things, you know, as if, you know, sort of for a moment forgetting what times we're living in, and it's very, very difficult to plan ahead and know, like, kind of what trajectory to chart out when you, like, literally have no idea whether, you know, a war might break out the next day. How do you plan? How do you invest? You know, and this has been one of the fundamental, if not the fundamental issue thus far, not only today, but I think for the past 3 decades, really, you know, because this political crisis has been ongoing for such a long time, and it is sort of continuing, alas. But I think, you know, instead of just waiting for the situation to resolve and the conditions to be all jolly, you know, we have to be of Armenia's art scene to enable a stable society, a stable political order as well. The arts have to become much more engaged in the social, political, and also economic processes that are currently taking place, which is unfortunately not happening. But the other thing is, you know, I mean, just before this, you know, Anna and Garnet were talking about, well, how do you, like, how do you access these global networks and channels, you know, and being constantly localized and on the margins and in the interior is not going to be susceptible to the development of the scene, which is absolutely true. But in order to be in order to access these channels, you know, one has to be relevant. Yeah, you can't, I mean, yes, you can be on those platforms, on those international, you can be in the Biennale, you can be at an international fair, but it's not going to make much of a difference unless you can create this aura of relevance and significance, and for people to understand that you are part of these global discourses that are shaping our reality today. So I think the primary challenge that is facing us as arts managers, as artists, art practitioners, arts managers, is to create these a sense of relevance and value. This is a very, very tricky thing. And I mean, this is one of the reasons I created Mamban Archive, because, as as other speakers touched on this, we do have an issue of institutional memory, and you cannot have a sense of value, tangible value, whether it's in cultural terms or financial terms, if you do not have collective and institutional memory about the arts and its relevance, not only locally, but also regionally and internationally. And we have to strive to make the local arts and the local art production and the local arts heritage relevant beyond the borders of Armenia. This is absolutely crucial. And if we're not working in that direction, then, everything else is kind of a bit futile. And once that, and the role of the arts manager here is being that catalyst, that mediator, who has the skills and the clout to be a representative, to argue for that relevance, to argue for the fact that, yes, we are part of those global conversations, and it is important to pay attention to the art production coming from reality today within the borders of this country, but has I don't want to use that word universal, but at least a transcultural significance. And this is what we need right now as art managers. I'm talking about a specific type of practitioner which is only coming to the fore right now, because obviously as a curator, you're holding so many balls in the air, or you're wearing so many hats. Sometimes it can get really confusing, and we need this diversification as well. You cannot be a curator, a marketing manager, a PR manager, I don't know, a dealer, all at the same time, an art historian, a critic. It's just not viable, and we need a clear understanding that these are all different professions, and they need to work in a unison and exist as a chain mechanism, where every agent, every actor is dependent upon each other, and they sort of complete each other. And once that realization sort of sets in, and people sort of don't try to kind of monopolize the fields that they're working in, and be actively collaborating for a common goal, I think, there's going to be a major breakthrough. And of course, we will see enormous changes once with any kind of political shift that happens in the near future. So, but, to just close off, I am also cautiously optimistic in the sense that I think the arts are gonna play an increasingly important role in the coming years as part of our international cultural diplomacy and political strategies, and I think that's gonna be a game changer.
Thank you so much. Anna, Karina, do you have anything to add?
I would like to see the government take a much more active step towards developing the sector by opening access to funds, strategic investments in education programs for developing new professions and skill sets, things we've touched upon today, for like the export, distribution, and management of the arts. Creating incentivization schemes and mechanisms so that even if you don't have money to pour into the arts, you can just help the sector, build itself up through different deduction schemes and tax reforms. I'd love to see nice blue chip gallery in Armenia. I mean, maybe that's ambitious for 5 years, but I would love to see that. A gallery that would be actively making those connections between international artists and local artists. And I'm really curious to see how technology is going to open new opportunities for the sector. And I think, you know, we've seen things like digital passports for, like, you know, digital nomads and people opening new businesses around the world. And, you know, what about like a digital artist passport to enable artists to travel the world and exactly establish that relevance and create those connections and cultural exchange. Maybe technology can be a way for, you know, providing governments that assurance, whatever assurance they need to give you a visa to travel. But that's really important to encourage mobility, not because we want to drain the country of its creative talent, but because you send people out to explore the world, they'll always bring something enriching back. And I think that that mobility is really essential because digital, you know, the internet opens many things, but it's different to go someplace and connect with people and make things together and see things and experience them physically. But digital tools can maybe enable those processes. So I'm excited to see how technology can create new avenues for access and hopefully new sources of infrastructure that are missing.
Thank you.
Okay, I would love to add just a couple of things to what has been said, and I really, really hope that everything Anna, Vigen, and Ani said is going to come true. As much as I can see from the small cities, I see a lot of internal interest in the country, like that, like signs of decentralization of art. Because just months ago, our colleagues from Stepan Schauman Museum announced an art residency, and you really have to see the list of the applicants. They're all established artists, and it's super cool that they want to come to this a little bit depressed, ruined city and work with the local material, which is not the easiest thing to work with. Our art residency in Nest, in the ICA, is packed until September, so there is a lot of interest. A lot of artists are visiting Yerevan from countries, not only from Europe, from Korea, from a lot of countries, so people somehow know. And I think the political situation isn't going to be better, but I mean, it's not a bad thing, because pain has always been a great material for art. So I hope we will be more engaged as a community, and as Vigen said, more involved into the social political context. And also I see a lot of things happening in the, like, good signs, maybe not a lot of things, but enough to see a good trend in it. I see a lot of artist-run projects, which is also a good sign. This art quartal, which is one of the brightest examples. There are small communities around comics and zines. There are some young people. You call these things very marginal, very underground, but they are popping up, and you can see them. And in the, I mean, you see new podcasts about art, about creative industries. And I very much hope that they won't shut down after second episode, but I think it's a good trend, and I see a lot of good signs. So it's my small prediction.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for such an insightful and thought-provoking conversation. It was really, really interesting, and I hope we'll still have a chance to talk, because the sector for arts management in Armenia is really small. And I'd just love to remind that the webinar was hosted by AU Arts Management Program, and we're going to have another Armenian language webinar, which is scheduled for next month. And thanks everyone who joined our webinar, and sorry for going a bit over time, but the conversation was just very, very interesting, and we couldn't help ourselves. And thank you again, everyone, and hopefully see you soon.